Okay, so we're going to do some exam practice today. On Saturday, we're going to go through the use of English parts, which were the worst parts in the exam, which I think this time for most C1s as well as C2s was the use of English part one and part two. You did obviously do worse this time than you usually do, so that's something to take into consideration, but we're still going to be revising those parts specifically. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Okay. And the first activity we're going to do is going to be this use of English part three that I've got here. All right, guys, I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Not even that. It's, yep, 2 minutes to four. I'll give you until about 3 minutes past four to get this done. Okay. As always, be careful if you put a noun that you don't put something in the opposite. Make sure you have at least one negative prefix. Go ahead. Okay, let's go. We're going to correct it now. So I've got the two Lucias, Andrea, Alex, Pablo was there as well, and there was someone else from C1. There was Laura and Vivian as well. Okay, so number one, I'll try to zoom in the next activities, guys, closer so you can see them more clearly. All right, a single universally recognized name could enable companies to make major savings in production and promotion costs. So we have an adverb and a noun. Especially now that world advertising is in such context is a reality in such context as major sporting events. Research and development leading to the innovation itself. Thousands of possible names may need to be investigated to find one that is internationally accepted. Adjective. An indication of the scope of the problem, and anybody who's interested in actually doing the exam at some point, they might take an indication of the scope of the problem as a connector to use in their writing or in their speaking, and it just means how serious or how not serious a problem would be. Okay. Who spent over 2 years successfully or unsuccessfully researching the name for a new tire. So I would say unsuccessfully. They then launched an international competition amongst their employees, receiving over 10,000 entries. Around 30 names were selected from an enormous number of submissions. SUBMISSIONS, submissions. Right, in this part of the exam, sometimes people get the words correct, sometimes they just make up a completely other word, but sometimes they have the words correct, but they've misspelled the word. So in this activity here, I'm going to zoom it right in so nobody has an excuse. If somebody can't see the screen who is in C1, for instance, Carolina, who's sitting at the back, you should move to the front. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to rewrite these words without the spelling mistakes. Go. Okay, I'm going to start to explain the mistakes. Some of them are correct. So let's go. Occurrence is correct. Happening is 1N instead of 2 N's. Development has no E, so it's also incorrect because of the E. Statement is correct. Reference, just 1R. Opening is correct. Really, double L. Factually is correct. Beautifully, double L. Truthfully, 1L. Disappointed is correct. Dissatisfied, double S. Irregularity, the double R goes at the start, not in the middle. Reliable is correct. Undeniable would be with an I instead of a Y. Usable is correct. Refusing has no E before the I. Basically has double L. And argument has no E. Okay? Right, guys, I'm going to keep moving on. I'm going to try to do this as quickly as possible. All right. In this part of the exam, you have to categorize make, get, and do with the different options. So you're supposed to just put them here, make, get, or do. So in your notebooks now, I want you to write those 3 columns. No, wait, sorry, I'm just going to change actually, and we're going to do this one instead. Let's do this one instead because it's more related to part number 3, which is the one we're working on, and it's going to be a less writing, so we're going to be faster. Okay, you have, we're not going to make too many words because that would take a long time, and there's like infinite number of words we can make here. But I'm going to give you a minute, a couple of minutes to try to see if you can make one word for each of these other words, okay? So you can go ahead now. For example, govern, you could change to government, governmental, governable, ungovernable, ungovernably, governing, and governor. But let's just see if we can get one alternative for each of them. And I'll read out a few options now.
Estudiante Lucía Rubio acude a recepción por su mochila. Lucía Rubio. Laura Ortega acude a recepción por la mochila. Laura Ortega.
Okay, hopefully you've at least thought of, even if you didn't have time to write, a couple of words or one word for each of them. I'm going to now, from the answers, read out a lot of the options and explain what some of the other words would be. Hopefully here, if you have any new words, you would take note of them because this is the specific C1 book, which means that the vocabulary here is the vocabulary that you're going to see in the exam, but not only is it the exam vocabulary for part number 3, but it's also the vocabulary that's expected of you in your speaking and in your writing exam. Okay, so obviously you don't have to say governably necessarily, but you could have to say governmental programs or something like that in the use of English part 3. So let's go. With care, we have carer, which would be the person, a person who's a carer. They look after someone else, usually somebody who looks after the elderly. Caring, a positive adjective for someone. Uncaring, obviously the negative version of that. Careful, carefully, which I'm sure is the one that everybody got. Careless, somebody who doesn't make an effort to look after things, or somebody who's not worried about things. And carefree, a person who's very relaxed and they don't have a care in the world. They're a carefree person. Again, if any of these words seem like something that you could use in your speaking, highlight them or put them in your vocabulary lists. Anybody who has any intention of doing the C1 exam this year should have a well-developed vocabulary list by now. All right, critic. We've got the verb, criticize. What else have we got? We have got criticism, the noun for what you can receive. You could receive criticism. Again, another good word to use in the exam. Critical, a bit easier, I would say. Critically, uncritical, and uncritically. That I would say the best one there is criticism or criticize. And those again are verbs you could use to do in the speaking part 3 when you're having the partner discussion. And you could say, I would criticize that argument by, or you could use it in your essay. Many criticize the idea that, or many criticize, and then the topic at hand, for instance, many criticize work experience programs, something like that. We need to try to use like a variety of nouns, and these give us some options. Okay, child. We could say childish, someone who behaves in an immature manner. Childhood, of course. We got that one already, I feel like. And children. So not very many options here. We could also say childlike, maybe something that the difference being if you behave childish, it has a negative connotation. Somebody would be calling you immature, and childlike tends to have positive connotations. All right, break. Here we go with break. Broken and unbroken. An outbreak. I like this one. An outbreak of something, for instance, the COVID outbreak. It's another more complicated one that you could use, and maybe not the first one that comes to your mind, but like zombie apocalypse, there's been an outbreak. And breakdown. A breakdown in communication. It doesn't always have to be like a car breakdown. And something that is breakable. It could be breakable or unbreakable. You could use it to talk about friends and family or people around you. You have an unbreakable trust, an unbreakable bond with someone in your family. Okay, occasion, simple. That one was a piece of cake, occasionally. Then we've got force. We could say forceful. Okay, forcefully, forceful, forcefully with the adjective. Enforce, which is another good one if we're talking about governments, because you do often have the topic of governments where you have to discuss laws. What can the government do to reduce pollution? How could the government encourage people to recycle more? Or even in one C1 essay, I saw the topic of reducing cars in cities, and you had to create more pedestrian areas. And you could say governments must enforce the laws instead of governments must make people. So an alternative verb here. I'm trying to focus on verbs I can give you. Again, anybody who wants to do the exam, although this seems boring, these are the moments where I'm giving you the verbs that you need for your writings. Okay? Reinforce and reinforcement. Reinforce is different because reinforce would be if I'm trying to maybe make you feel better about something, I would be reinforcing you. And reinforcement, you might say students need reinforcement before exams in order to feel better. So you're using a complicated verb, but you've even changed it to a noun. So again, that would put up your mark. Okay, deep. We've obviously got deep, deeply, depth. You could also use the verb deepen, which is a nice one, to deepen the relationship you have, to deepen your knowledge on something. Okay, I'm not going to put much more because I like that one. Fragile, easy, fragility, the fragility of something. Friend, we got friendship, friendly, friendliness, unfriendly. The verb befriend, that's a good one as well. If you have to talk about your social circle, to befriend someone. Repair. This one has a few more options, which might be interesting. So we could say something would be repairable, or the opposite, irreparable. Irreparable. Okay. And any more here? Irreparably. Yep, irreparable and irreparably. Let me just see if there's an extra I here. Okay, so if I were somebody who was going to do in my next C1 writing, I would try to use criticize, enforce, and deepen. Those are ones which I feel like are very general and you can use them in all the topics. Okay, I take away the text box now and we move on to the next task. Oops. Okay, cool. This was a reading, guys. This was a reading with the parts A, B, C, and D. In this part of the exam, this is where we're supposed to have more marks. Again, somebody who, sorry, somebody who was considering doing the C1 exam this year in this part, they should have between an average of 7 to 9 correct here in this part, because despite the fact that it seems like the most challenging part, this is just from sheer exhaustion, having already finished all the other parts of the exam. And here, it's nowhere near as complicated as it seems. So I always tell people to do the exam like this in this part. Okay, this here is an introductory activity, but I hope that before the exam, guys, none of you are, sorry. Yeah, here we wouldn't have 7 out of 10. That would be in part number 6. In this part, if we can have 2 out of 4, that's perfect. If you can have 3, obviously it makes a big difference because it's a double. So here, I always say the same thing again. I would quickly read these and I would try to see, in this case, I wouldn't read number 1 and find number 1. I would try to differentiate between 1, 2, 3, and 4. So what is the question asking me to find? Shares extracts B view of the economic significance of major languages. So the first thing I would do would be go into extract B and find out what is their view on the economic significance of major languages. Does they think it has a positive economic impact, a negative one? How is it affecting our economy? First, I would figure out what B think, and maybe even in my own words, I would write here a synonym of what they think, because then it's going to be easier to find. If I don't understand what B says, I'm never going to find the other one. That's the first thing I would do. Then I would go on to number 2, expresses a different view from others regarding the need to preserve minority languages. So from the 4 texts, three of them have something in common about their view to preserve the languages. First, I have to be able to discover what the 3 of them have, and I don't have to read all of the texts carefully. I just have to scan through the texts. I would scan through them and see what do they have in common, and then I'll find out which one it is that's different. Then takes a different view from the others regarding the future of small languages. Small language, and again, minority languages. But in this case, it's about the future. So the 4 of them have said, 3 of them have said something, and one of them has some sort of expectation. Maybe one of them thinks that in the future they'll become more popular, and the other 3 think that the small minority languages will unfortunately die out. Again, if I don't have clear what they all think, I can't find that one. Takes a similar view as C on the effect of language disappearance. So what does C say about language disappearance? One by one, you have to do this exercise one by one. You cannot waste time in the exam reading all of the paragraphs and reading all of the questions. There's no need to do that. So for instance, we've just read number 4. I'm going to look for number 4, and then we've got 3 minutes, guys. We're going to finish for today. So last thing, concentration. Takes a similar view to extract C on the effect of language disappearance. I'm going to go to extract C and I'm going to try and see how they feel about language disappearance. All right, I'm going to read it for you guys. Hopefully I'm not going to lose my voice today. I'm going to see if I can zoom in even more. Okay. Many PhD students studying majority languages lack the resources to develop their language skills, with the result that they have to rely on interpreters and translators to communicate with speakers of the language they're studying. This, I believe, has a detrimental effect on the quality of their research. At the same time, they have to struggle against the frequently expressed opinions that minority languages serve no useful purpose and should be allowed to die a natural death. Such a view fails to take into account the fact that a unique body of knowledge and culture built up over thousands of years is contained in a language, and that language extinction and species extinction are different facets of the same process. are different facets of the same process. They are part of an impending global catastrophe, which is beginning to look unavoidable. So this person thinks that the small languages dying is obviously a terrible shame due to the cultural enrichment and all of that that embodies. However, it seems like part of another bigger issue that's something that is unavoidable, that is definitely going to happen. So now I go back and I see what the question says. Takes a similar effect of language disappearance. So this person obviously believes that the effect of language disappearance would be negative on culture. And it says, is contain the language extinction and species extinction are different facets of the same process. So that this sort of extinction would be a death as such to specific types of parts of humanity. So now I would have to find somebody else who felt the same. Whereas other texts might say that they believe that this is a natural process of globalization. Another text much touched on the fact that it could be have a negative impact culturally. All right, guys. So mini summary here. Use some of the verbs I gave you today. Be careful with your spelling and use of English Part 3. I hope you took notes of the vocabulary. I know many of you who are already here today are not going to go back and watch it again. But if you are wanting to do the exam, having these classes recorded should be something that you should think about. Okay, guys, time to finish, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.